Letter 3. The absolute truth lying in the center of mystery is like the sun, it blinds ordinary sight and man sees only the shadow. The Avalon can gaze at the dazzling light, likewise only the prepared soul can bear its luster. Nevertheless the great something which is the inmost of the holy mysteries has never been hidden from the piercing gaze of him who can bear the light. God and nature have no mysteries for their children. They are caused by the weakness of our nature, unable to support light, because it is not yet organized to bear the chaste light of unveiled truth. This weakness is the cloud that covers the sanctuary, this is the curtain which veils the Holy of Holies. But in order that man may recover the veiled light, strength, and dignity, divinity bends to the weakness of its creatures, and writes the truth that is interior and eternal mystery on the outside of things, so that man can transport himself through this to their spirit. These letters are the ceremonies or the rituals of religion, which lead man to the interior life of union with God. Mystic hieroglyphs are these letters also, they are sketches and designs holding interior and holy truth. Religion and the mysteries go hand in hand to lead our brethren to truth, both have for object the reversing and renewing of our natures, both have for the end the rebuilding of a temple inhabited by wisdom and love, or God with man. But religion and the mysteries would be useless phenomena if divinity had not also accorded means to attain these great ends. But these means are only in the innermost of the sanctuary. The mysteries are required to build a temple to religion, and religion is required to unite man with God. Such is the greatness of religion, and such the exalted dignity of the mysteries from all time. It would be unjust to you, beloved brothers, that we should think that you have never regarded the holy mysteries in this aspect, the one which shows them as the only means able to preserve in purity and integrity the doctrine of the important truths concerning God, nature, and man. This doctrine was couched in holy symbolic language, and the truths which it contained having been gradually translated among the outer circle into the ordinary languages of man, became in consequence more obscure and unintelligible. The mysteries, as you know, beloved brothers, promise things which are and which will remain always the heritage of but a small number of men. These are the mysteries which can neither be bought nor sold publicly, and can only be acquired by a heart which has attained to wisdom and love. He in whom this holy flame has been awakened lives in true happiness, content with everything and in everything free. He sees the cause of human corruption and knows that it is inevitable. He hates no criminal, he pities him, and seeks to raise him who has fallen, and to restore the wanderer, because he feels notwithstanding all the corruption, in the whole there is no taint. He sees with a clear eye the underlying truth in the foundation of all religion, he knows the sources of superstition and of incredulity, as being caused by modifications of truth which have not attained perfect equilibrium. We are assured, my esteemed brothers, that you consider the true mystic from this aspect, and that you will not attribute to royal art, that which the energy of some isolated individuals have made of this art. It is, therefore, with these views, which accord exactly with ours, that you will compare religion, and the mysteries of the holy schools of wisdom, to loving sisters who have watched over the good of mankind since the necessity of their birth. Religion divides itself into exterior and interior religion, exterior signifying ceremony, and interior, worship in spirit and in truth, the outer schools possessing the letter and the symbol, the inner ones, the spirit and meaning, but the outer schools were united to the inner ones by ceremonies, as also the outer schools of the mysteries were linked with the inner one by means of symbol. Thus religion can never be merely ceremony, but hidden and holy mysteries penetrate through symbol into the outer worship to prepare men properly for the worship of God in spirit and in truth. Very soon the night of symbol will disappear, the light will bring forth the day, and the mysteries no longer veiled will show themselves in the splendor of full truth. The vestibule of nature, the temple of reason and the sanctuary of revelation, will form but one temple. Thus the great edifice will be completed, the edifice which consists in the reunion of man, nature, and God. A perfect knowledge of man, of nature, and of God will be the lights which will enable the leaders of humanity to bring back from every side their wandering brothers, those who are led by the prejudices of reason, by the turbulence of passions, to the ways of peace and knowledge. We are approaching the period of light, and the reign of wisdom and love, that of God who is the source of light. Brothers of light, there is but one religion whose simple truth spreads in all religions like branches, returning through multiplicity into the unity of the tree. Sons of truth, there is but one order, but one brotherhood, but one association of men thinking alike in the one object of acquiring the light. From this center, misunderstanding has caused innumerable orders, but all will return from the multiplicity of opinions, to the only truth and to the true order, the association of those who are able to receive the light, the community of the elect. With this measure all religions and all orders of man must be measured. Multiplicity is in the ceremony of the exterior, truth only in the interior. The right of these brotherhoods is in the variety of explanation of the symbols caused by the lapse of time, needs of the day, and other circumstances. The true community of light be only one. The exterior symbol is only the sheath which holds the inner. It may change and multiply, but it can never weaken the truth of the interior. Moreover, it was necessary, we ought to seek it and try to decipher it to discover the meaning of the spiritual interior. All errors, divisions, all misunderstandings in religion and in secret societies only concern the letter. What rests behind it remains always pure and holy. Soon the time for those who seek the light will be accomplished, for the day comes when the old will be united to the new, the outer to the inner, the high with the low, the heart with the brain, man with God, and this epoch is destined for present age. Do not ask, beloved brothers, why the present age? Everything has its time for being subject to time and space. It is in such wise according to the unvarying law of the wisdom of God, who has coordinated all in harmony and perfection. The elect should first labor to acquire both wisdom and love, in order to earn the gift of power, which unchangeable divinity gives only to those who know and those who love. Morning follows night, and the sun rises, and all moves on to full midday, where all shadows disappear in his vertical splendor. Thus, the letter of truth must exist, then comes the practical explanation, then the truth itself. Only truth can comprehend truth, then alone can the spirit of truth appear which sets the seals closing the light. He who now can receive the truth will understand. It is to you, Much loved brothers, you who labor to reach truth, you who have so faithfully preserved the hieroglyphics of the holy mysteries in your temple, it is to you that the first ray of truth will be directed. This ray will pierce through the cloud of mystery, and will announce the full day and the treasure which it brings. Do not ask who those are who write to you, look at the spirit not the letter, the thing, not at persons. Neither pride, nor self-seeking, neither does any unworthy motive, exist in our retreats. We know the object and the destination of man, and the light, which lights us works in all our actions. We are especially called to write to you, dear brothers of light, and that which gives power to our commission is the truth which we possess, and which we pass on to you on the least sign, and according to the measure of the capacity of each. Light is apt for communication, where there is reception and capacity, but it constrains no one, and waits its reception peacefully. Our desire, our aim, our office is to revivify the dead letter, and to spiritualize the symbols, turn the passive into the active, death into life. But this we cannot do by ourselves, but through the Spirit of light of Him who is wisdom and the light of the world. Until the present time the inner sanctuary has been separated from the temple, and the temple beset with those who belong only to the precincts. But the time is coming when the innermost will be reunited with the temple, in order that those who are in the temple can influence those who are in the outer courts, so that the outer pass in. In our sanctuary all the hidden mysteries are preserved intact, they have never been profaned. This sanctuary is invisible, as is a force which is only known through its action. By this short description, my dear brothers, you can tell who we are, and it will be superfluous to assure you that we do not belong to those restless natures who seek to build in this common life an ideal after their own fantastic imaginations. Neither do we belong to those who wish to play a great part in the world, and who promise miracles that they themselves do not understand. We do not represent either that class of minds, who, resenting the condition of certain things, have no object but the desire of dominating others, and who love adventure and exaggeration. We can also assure you that we belong to no other sect or association than the one true and great one of those who are able to receive the light. We are not also of those who think it their right to mold all after their own model, the arrogance to seek to remodel all other societies. We assure you faithfully that we know the innermost of religion and of the holy mysteries, and that we possess with absolute certainty all that has been surmised to be in the addendum, and that this said possession gives us the strength to justify our commission, and to impart to the dead letter and hieroglyphic everywhere both spirit and life. The treasures in our sanctuary are many. We understand the spirit and meaning of all symbols and all ceremony which have existed since the day of creation to the present time, as well as the most interior truths of all the holy books, with the laws and customs of primitive people. We possess a light by which we are anointed, and by means of which we read the hidden and secret things of nature. We possess a fire which feeds us, and which gives us the strength to act upon everything in nature. We possess a key to open the gate of mystery, and a key to shut nature's laboratory. We know of the existence of a bond which will unite us to the upper worlds, and reveal to us their sights and their sounds. All the marvels of nature are subordinate to our will by its being united with divinity. We have mastered the science which draws directly from nature, whence there is no error, but truth and light only. In our school we are instructed in all things because our Master is the light itself and its essence. The plenitude of our scholarship is the knowledge of this tie between the divine and spiritual worlds, and of the spiritual world with the elementary, and of the elementary world with the material world. By these knowledges we are in condition to coordinate the spirits of nature and the heart of man. Our science is the inheritance promised to the elect, otherwise, those who are duly prepared for receiving the light, and the practice of our science is in the completion of the divine union with the child of man. We could often tell you, beloved brothers, of marvels relating to the hidden things in the treasury of the sanctuary, which would amaze and astonish you. We could speak to you about ideas concerning which the profoundest philosophy is as removed as the earth from the sun, but to which we are near being one with the light of the innermost. But our object is not to excite your curiosity, but to raise your desires to seek the light at its source, where your search for wisdom will be rewarded and your longing for love satisfied, for wisdom and love dwell in our retreats. The stimulus of their reality and of their truth is our magical power. We assure you that our treasures, though of infinite value, are concealed in so simple a manner that they entirely baffle the researches of opinionated science, and also though these treasures would bring to carnal minds both madness and sorrow, nevertheless, they are, and they ever remain to us the treasures of the highest wisdom. My best blessing upon you, O my brothers, if you understand these great truths. The recovery of the triple word and of its power will be your reward. Your happiness will be in having the strength to help to reunite man with man, and with nature and with God, which is the real work of every workman who has not rejected the cornerstone. Now we have fulfilled our trust and we have announced the approach of full day, and the joining of the inner sanctuary with the temple. We leave the rest to your own free will. We know well, to our bitter grief, that even as the Savior was not understood in his personality, but was ridiculed and condemned in his humility, likewise also his Spirit which will appear in glory will also be rejected and despised by many. Nevertheless the coming of his Spirit should be announced in the temples in order that these words should be fulfilled. I have knocked at your doors and you have not opened them to me. I have called and you have not listened to my voice. I have invited you to the wedding, but you were busy with other things. May peace and the light of the Spirit be with you.
Translator's note. It appears to me that it is most necessary to bear in mind, while reading the above, that as a rule all mystic writing is, so to speak, synthetic. This seems a contradiction somewhat to the continual repetition of very similar words and ideas. It is, however, synthetic in this respect, that though apparently diffuse, it is in reality condensed to the utmost. There can be no manner of doubt that the author of the letters is addressing readers and hearers who are already much advanced in philosophy. It is well now and then, to use words in their true meaning, and say that his hearers and readers must have been true lovers of wisdom in the best sense, or he could not have addressed them as he does. Because, as I think I ventured to suggest in the notes to the first letter, regeneration to the mystic does not mean the degenerate interpretation of modern theology. The royal art hinted at in these letters is well called royal, as it is neither more nor less than a close imitation, under the inspiration of God's wisdom, of the creative power itself, or rather the recreation of man back to his original royal standpoint. What other work can compare to this? No wonder, theology, in the early ages meant something very different in sense of fullness to the emptiness of theology as expounded in modern times. This indeed does hold the original letter, but the wonders lying behind it wait now for the true priest to decipher. This royal art may be taken as pertaining to the Christian mysteries, which Eckhart Schausen speaks of with such deep respect and reverence as being in the inner sanctuary. In that inner sanctuary, where we may surmise none but the elect or the recreated could enter. No wonder the prayers of such men ascended with sweet savor to the Master, no wonder the work of such men was as for century to century they worked on in order and knowledge towards the great consummation, when the end was achieved and the temple in its perfection manifested as the first fruits, so that all who were ready saw, and all who were ready heard, for the day of the Gentiles had arrived. Eckhart Schausen is, therefore, addressing the modern descendants in his day of those elect men who, coming after the consummation, could never achieve again the same work, but who had entered into the mysteries, and whose duty was to protect and cherish them. And to all followers, however remote they may have been in his day, and in our days, from the special elect at the great period of the Church, is the same work given. His synthetic language, therefore, is really addressed to minds already in good possession of a vast quantity of knowledge to whom it was not necessary to do more than point the discourse by short, direct, condensed description, for it is very clear that except in inculcating respect to the service of religion, there is very little that would be directly teaching to an ordinary theological student, who, we will suppose, reads his exhortation with no knowledge of interior process really meant. Indeed, it would seem to such rather assumption and assertion, especially the latter part where Eckhart Schausen, speaking in the plural, directly affirms his transcendental position with no explanation as to the how and the why. It is clear, therefore, that he is addressing real students of the mysteries, and that whoever is fortunate enough to be a real student, to such the language will be sufficiently illuminative. If they were empty and inflated claims, it is certain that his letters would long ago have been repudiated as worthless, but we know that the contrary has been the case, and that no contradictions on his own grounds have ever been made. One must notice, also, that in this letter, after speaking chiefly of the Church in the previous letters, it is the temple that is generally referred to. Does it not all point to a conclusion, which I fancy all students of these matters agree to, that the Church, whether Eastern or Western, is meant as being the receptacle for the letter, the enunciator of the synthesized unchangeable doctrine, and whose religion lies in symbol and hieroglyph, whereas it is reserved for another order, that of the temple or the redeemed men within the Church to hold the mystery therein concealed, forming the nameless society which is made up from chosen, i.e. capable, men and women, out of the inner societies which have always existed as circles within more and more nearly approaching the sacred center. All mystics exhort students to respect and revere the religion in which they are born, being, as Eckhart Schausen so repeatedly points out, the standpoint from which more interior journey can alone be safely made. The word mystery is often most annoying to some minds, as is also the continual holding out of apparently vague and elusive hopes and expectations. Eckhart Schausen especially says he does not wish to awaken curiosity, it is nevertheless clear that he does. To some minds it will remain mere curiosity, but others will be stimulated to prolonged and patient search and work. There can be no doubt in such case the road will open unexpectedly, and work will be pointed out that was not foreseen. Mystery not only means veiled knowledge, but also what is beyond our senses, so we call it rightly mystery in opposition to exact science which we know is within the capability of all industrious students, whereas mystery opens the possibility of undreamt of knowledge, and undreamt of happiness, for all the noble souls who we presume have a right to say so, say it is the pearl without price. The great philosophy of the East in its grand and sonorous language says so, and we in modern times find that such was ever the one idea of the first philosophers, to which sources our most recent modern philosophy is wisely once more directing earnest attention.
Letter 4. As infinity in numbers loses itself in the unit, and as the innumerable rays of a circle are united in one single center only, it is likewise with the mysteries. their hieroglyphics and infinite number of emblems have the object of exemplifying but one single truth. He who knows this has found the key to understand everything all at once. There is but one God, but one truth, and one way which leads to this grand truth. There is but one means of finding it. He who has found this way possesses everything in its possession, all wisdom in one book alone, all strength in one force, every beauty in one single object, all riches in one treasure only, every happiness in one perfect felicity. And the sum of all these perfections is Jesus Christ, who was crucified and who lived again. Now, this great truth, expressed thus, it is true, only an object of faith, but it can become also one of experimental knowledge, as soon as we are instructed Christ can be or become all this. This great mystery was always an object of instruction in the secret school of the invisible and interior church. This great knowledge was understood in the earliest days of Christianity under the name of Disciplina Arcana. From this secret school are derived all the rites and ceremonies extant in the outer church. But the spirit of these grand and simple verities was withdrawn into the interior, and in our day it is entirely lost as to the exterior. It has been prophesied long ago, dear brothers, that all which is hidden shall be revealed in these latter days, but it has also been predicted that many false prophets will arise, and the faithful are warned not to believe every spirit, but to prove them if they really come from God. 1 John chapter 4 verse 2. The Apostle himself explains how this truth is ascertained. He says, "Hereby know ye the Spirit of God, every spirit which confesseth that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of God, and every spirit which confesseth not is not of God." That is to say, the Spirit who separates in him the divine and human from God. We confess that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh, and hence the Spirit of truth speaks by us. But the mystery that Jesus Christ is come in the flesh is of wide extent and great depth, and in it is contained the knowledge of the divine human, and it is this knowledge that we are choosing today as object for our instruction. As we are not speaking to neophytes in matters of faith, it will be much easier for you, dear brothers, to receive the sublime truths which we will present to you, as without doubt you have already chosen as object for your holy meditation various preparatory subjects. Religion considered scientifically is the doctrine of the reunion of man separated from God to man reunited to God. Hence its sole object is to unite every human being to God, through which union alone can humanity attain its highest felicity both temporally and spiritually. This doctrine, therefore, of reunion is of the most sublime importance, and being a doctrine, it necessarily must have a method by which it leads and teaches us. The first is the knowledge of the correct means of reunion, and secondly the teaching, after the knowledge of the correct means, how these means should be suitably coordinated to the end. This grand concept of reunion, on which all religious doctrine is concentrated, could never have been known to man. It has always been altogether outside the sphere of scientific knowledge, but this very ignorance of man has made revelation absolutely necessary to us, otherwise we could, unassisted, never have found the means of rising out of this state of ignorance. Revelation entails the necessity of faith in revelation, because he who has no experience or knowledge whatsoever of a thing must necessarily believe that he wishes to know and have experience. If faith fails, there is no desire for revelation, and the mind of man closes by itself its own door and road for discovering the methods revealed by revelation only. As action and reaction follow each other in nature, so also inevitably revelation and faith act and react. One cannot exist without the other, and the more faith a man has, the more will revelation be made to him of matters which lie in obscurity. It is true, and very true, that all the veiled truths of religions, even those heavily veiled ones, the most difficult ones to us, will one day be revealed and justified before a tribunal of the most rigid justice, but the weakness of men, the lack of penetration in perceiving the relation and correspondence between physical and spiritual nature, requires that the highest truths should only be imparted gradually. The holy obscurity of the mysteries is thus on account of our weakness, because our eyes are enabled only gradually to bear their full and dazzling light. In every grade at which the believer in revelation arrives, he obtains clearer light, and this progressive illumination continues the more convincing, because every truth of faith so acquired becomes more and more vitalized, passing finally into conviction. Hence faith is founded on our weakness, and also on the full light of revelation which will, in its communication with us, direct us according to our capabilities to the gradual understanding of things, so that in due order the cognizance of the most elevated truths will be ours. Those objects which are quite unknown to human sense are necessarily belonging to the domain of faith. Man can only adore and be silent, but if he wishes to demonstrate matters which cannot be manifested objectively, he necessarily falls into error. Man should adore and be silent, therefore, until such time arrives when these objects in the domain of faith become clearer, and, therefore, more easily recognized. Everything proves itself by itself as soon as we have acquired the interior experience of the truths revealed through faith, so soon as we are led by faith to vision, that is to say, to full cognizance. In all time have there been men illuminated of God who had this interior knowledge of the things of faith demonstrated objectively either in full or partly, according as the truths of faith passed into their understanding or their hearts. The first kind of vision was called divine illumination. The second was entitled. The inner sensorium was opened in many to divine and transcendental vision, called ecstasy because this inner sensorium was so enlarged that it entirely dominated the outer physical senses. But this kind of man is always inexplicable, and he must remain such always to the man of mere sense who has no organs receptive to the transcendental and supernatural. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him and he cannot know them, because they are spiritually judged. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 14, i.e. because his spiritual senses are not open to the transcendental world, so that he can have no more objective cognizance of such world than a blind man has of color. Thus, the natural man has lost these interior senses, or rather, the capacity for their development is neglected almost to atrophy. Thus, mere physical man is, in general, spiritually blind, one of the further consequences of the fall. Man then is doubly miserable. He not only has his eyes blindfolded to the sight of high truths, but his heart also languishes a prisoner in the bonds of flesh and blood, which confine him to animal and sensuous pleasures to the hurt of more elevated and genuine ones. Therefore, are we slaves to concupiscence, to the domination of tyrannical passions, and, therefore, do we drag ourselves as paralyzed sufferers supported on crutches, the one crutch being the weak one of mere human reason, and the other, sentiment, the one daily giving us appearance instead of reality, the other making us constantly choose evil, imagining it to be good. This is, therefore, our unhappy condition. Men can only be happy when the bandage which intercepts the true light falls from their eyes, and when the fetters of slavery are loosened from their hearts. The blind must see, the lame must walk, before happiness can be understood. But the great and all-powerful law to which the felicity or happiness of man is indissolubly attached is the one following: Man, let reason rule over your passions. For ages has man striven to teach and to preach, with, however, the result, after so many centuries, of but the blind always leading the blind, for in all the foolishness of misery into which we have fallen, we do not yet see that man wants more than man to raise us from this condition. Prejudices and errors, crimes and vices, only change from century to century, they are never extirpated from humanity. Reason without illumination flickers faintly in every age, in the heavy air of spiritual darkness. The heart, exhausted with passions, is also the same century after century. There is but one who can heal these evils, but one who is able to open our inner eyes, but one who can free us from the bonds of sensuality. This one is Jesus Christ, the Savior of man, the Savior because he wishes to obliterate from us all the consequences which follow as result from the blindness of our natural reason, or the errors arising from the passions of ungoverned hearts. Very few men, beloved brothers, have a true and exact conception of the greatness of the idea meant by the redemption of man. Many suppose that Jesus Christ the Lord has only redeemed or rebought us by his blood from damnation, otherwise the eternal separation of man from God, but they do not believe that he could also deliver all those who are bound in him and confide in him, from all the miseries of this earth plane. Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world, he is the deliverer from all human wretchedness, and he has redeemed us from death and sin. How could he be all that, if the world must languish perpetually in the shades of ignorance and in the bonds of passions? It has been already very clearly predicted in the prophets that the time of the redemption of his people, the first Sabbath of time, will come. Long ago ought we to have acknowledged this most consolatory promise, but the true knowledge of God, of man, and of nature has been the real hindrance which has always obstructed our sight of the great mysteries of the faith. You must know, my brothers, that there is a dual nature, one pure, spiritual, immortal, and indestructible, the other impure, material, mortal, and destructible. The pure nature was before the impure. This latter originated solely through the disharmony and disproportion of substances which form destructible nature. Hence nothing is permanent until all disproportions and dissonances are eradicated, so that all remains in harmony. The incorrect conception regarding spirit and matter is one of the principal causes which prevent many verities of faith from shining in their true luster. Spirit is a substance, an essence, an absolute reality. Hence its properties are indestructibility, uniformity, penetration, indivisibility, and continuity. Matter is not a substance, it is aggregate. Hence it is destructible, divisible, and subject to change. The metaphysical world is one really existing, perfectly pure and indestructible, whose center we call Jesus Christ, and whose inhabitants are known by the names of angels and spirits. The physical world is that of phenomena, and it possesses no absolute truth. All that we call truth here is but relative, the shadow and phenomena only of truth. Our reason here borrows all its ideas from the senses, hence they are lifeless and dead. We draw everything from external objectivity, and our reason is like an ape who imitates what nature shows him outwardly. Thus the light of the senses is the principle of our earthly reason, sensuality the motive for our will, tending therefore to animal wants and their satisfaction. It is true, however, that we feel higher motives imperative, but up to the present we do not know either where to seek or where to find. In this world everything is corruptible. It is useless to seek here for a pure principle of reason and morality or motive for the will. This must be sought for in a more exalted world, there, where all is pure and indestructible, where there reigns a being all wisdom and all love. Thus the world neither can nor will become happy until this real being can be received by humanity in full and become its all in all. Man, dear brothers, is composed of indestructible and metaphysical substance, as well as of material and destructible substance, but in such a manner that the indestructible and eternal is, as it were, the destructible matter. Thus two contradictory natures are comprehended in the same man. The destructible substance enchains us to the sensible, the other seeks to deliver us from these chains, and to raise us to the spiritual. Hence the incessant combat between good and evil. The fundamental cause of human corruption is to be found in the corruptible matter from which man is formed. For this gross matter oppresses the action of the transcendental and spiritual principle, and is the true cause, hence, of the blindness of our understanding, and the errors of our inclinations. The fragility of a china vessel depends upon the clay from which it is formed. The most beautiful form that clay of any sort is able to receive must always remain fragile because the matter of which it is formed is also fragile. Thus do men remain likewise frail notwithstanding all our external culture. When we examine the causes of the obstacles keeping the natural man in such deep abasement, they are found in the grossness of the matter in which the spiritual part is, as it were, buried and bound. The inflexibility of fibers, the immovability of temperaments, that would wish to obey the refined stimulation of the spirit, are, as it were, the material chains which bind them, preventing in us the action of the sublime functions of which the spirit is capable. The nerves and fluidity of the brain can only yield us rough and obscure notions derived from phenomena, and not from truth and the things themselves. And as we cannot, by the strength of our thinking powers alone, have sufficient balance to oppose representations strong enough to counteract the violence of external sensation, the result is that we are governed by our sensations. And the voice of reason, which speaks softly internally, is deafened by the tumultuous noise of the elements, which keep our mechanism going. It is true that reason strains to raise itself above this uproar, and wishes to decide the combat, seeking to restore order by the light and force of its judgment. But its action is only like the rays of the sun constantly hidden by clouds. The grossness of all the matter in which material man consists, and the tissue of the whole edifice of his nature, is the cause of that disinclination which holds the soul in continual imperfection. The heaviness of our thinking power in general is consequent upon dependence upon gross and unyielding matter, this same matter forming the true bonds of the flesh, and is the true source of all error and vice. Reason, which should be an absolute legislator, is continually slave to sensuality, which raises itself as regent and, governing the reason that is drooping in chains, follows its own desires. This truth has been felt for long, and it has always been taught that reason should be sole legislator. It should govern the will and never be governed itself. Great and small feel this truth, but no sooner is it desired to put it in execution than the animal will vanquishes reason, and then the reason subjugates the animal will. Thus in every man the victory and defeat are alternate, hence this power and counterpower are the cause of this perpetual oscillation between good and evil, or the true and the false. If man wishes to be led to the true in such manner that we can only act after the laws of reason, and from the purified will, it is absolutely necessary to constitute the pure reason sovereign in man. But how can this be done when the matter out of which many men is formed is more or less brutal, divisible and corruptible, hence misery, illness, poverty, death, want, prejudices, errors, and vices, the necessary consequence of the limitation of the immortal spirit in the bonds of brute and corruptible matter. Sensuality is bound to rule if reason be fettered. Yes, friends and brothers, such is the general fate of man, and as this state of things is propagated from man to man, it may in all justice be called the hereditary corruption of man. We observe, in general, that the powers of reason act upon the heart, but in relation only to the specific constitution of the matter of which man is made. Thus it is extremely remarkable when we think that the sun vivifies this animal matter according to the measure of the distance from this terrestrial body, that it makes it suitable to the functions of animal economy, but at one degree more or less raised from spiritual influence. Diversity of nations, their properties with regard to climate, the variety of character, passions, manners, prejudices and customs, even their virtues and their vices, depend entirely upon the specific constitution of the matter from which they are formed, and in which the imprisoned spirit operates accordingly. Man's capacity for culture is modified to this constitution, likewise his science, which can only affect people as far as there is matter present, susceptible to such modification, and in this modification consists the capacity for culture suitable to such people, which suitability depends partly on climate, partly on descent. Generally, we find in each zone man much the same everywhere, weak and sensual, wise just in so far as his physical matter allows reason to triumph over the sensuous, or foolish if the sensuous obtains mastery over the more or less fettered spirit. In this lies the evil and the good specially belonging to each nation, as well as to each isolated individual. We find in the world at large the same corruption inherent in the matter from which man is made, only under various forms and modifications. From the lowest animal condition of savage nature, man rises to the idea of the social state, primarily through his wants and desires, strength and cunning, qualities especially animal. Inherently his animal develops thence gradually into other forms. The modifications of these fundamental animal tendencies are endless, and the highest degree to which human culture, as acquired by the world, has attained, up to the present has not carried things further than the putting of a finer polish on the substance of his animal instincts. This means to say, we are raised from the rank of the brute to that of the refined animal. But this period was necessary, because on its accomplishment begins a new era, when the animal instincts being fully developed, there commences the stage of evolution of the more elevated desires towards light and reason. Jesus Christ has written in our hearts in exceedingly beautiful words this great truth, that man must seek in his common clay for the cause of all his sorrows. When he said, the best man, he who strives the most to arrive at truth, sins 7 times a day, he wished to say by this, in the man of the finest organization, the 7 powers of the Spirit are still closed, therefore the 7 sensuous actions surmount them daily after their respective fashions. Thus the best man is exposed to error and passions, the best man is weak and sinful, the best man is not a free man, and, therefore, exempt from pain and trouble, the best man is subject to sickness and death, and why? Because all these are the natural inevitable consequences incidental to the qualities of the corrupt matter of which he is formed. Therefore, there could be no hope of higher happiness for humanity so long as this corruptible and material forms the principal substantial part of his being. The impossibility of mankind to transport itself, of itself, to true perfection, is a despairing thought. But, at the same time, one full of consolation, because, in consequence of this radical impossibility, and because of it, a more exalted and perfect being than man permitted himself to be clothed in this mortal and destructible envelope in order to make the mortal immortal, and the destructible indestructible. And in this object is to be sought the true reason for the incarnation of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the actual substantial Word by which all is made, and which existed from the beginning, Jesus Christ, the wisdom of God working in everything, was as the center of paradise of the world and of light. He was the only real organism by which alone divine strength could be communicated, and this organism is of immortal and pure nature, that indestructible substance which gives new life and raises all things to happiness and perfection. This pure incorruptible substance is the pure element in which spiritual man lived. From this perfect element, which God only can inhabit, and the substance out of which the first man was formed, from it was the first man separated by the fall. By the partaking of the tree of good and evil, of the mixture, the good and incorruptible principle with the bad and corruptible one, he was self-poisoned, so that his immortal essence retreated interiorly, and the mortal, pressing forward, clothed him externally. Thus, then, disappeared immortality, happiness, and life, and mortality and death were the results of this change. Many men cannot understand the idea of the tree of good and evil. This tree was, however, the product of movable but central matter, but in which destructibility had somewhat the superiority over the indestructible. The premature use of this fruit was that which poisoned Adam, robbing him of his immortality and enveloping him in this material mortal clay, and thenceforward he fell a prey to the elements which originally he governed. This unhappy event was, however, the reason why immortal wisdom, the pure metaphysical element, clothed itself with a mortal body and voluntarily sacrificed himself, so that the interior powers could penetrate into the center of the destruction, and could then ferment gradually, changing the mortal to the immortal. Thus, when it came about quite naturally that immortal man became subject to mortality through the enjoyment of mortal matter, it also happened quite naturally that mortal man could only recover his former dignity through the enjoyment of immortal matter. Thus, when it came about quite naturally that immortal man became subject to mortality through the enjoyment of mortal matter, it also happened quite naturally that mortal man could only recover his former dignity through the enjoyment of immortal matter. All passes naturally and simply under God's reign, but in order to understand this simplicity it is requisite to have pure ideas of God, of nature, and of man. And if the sublimest truths of faith are still, for us, wrapped in impenetrable obscurity, the reason for this is because we have up to the present dissolved the connection between God, nature, and man. Jesus Christ has spoken to his most intimate friends when he was still on this earth, of the grand mystery of regeneration, but all that he said was obscure to them, they could not then receive it, thus the development of these great truths was reserved for latter days, for it is the greatest and the last mystery of religion, in which all the others retreat as to a unity. Regeneration is no other than a dissolution of, and a release from this impure and corruptible matter, which enchains our immortal essence, plunging into deathly sleep its obstructed vital force. Therefore, there must necessarily be a real method to eradicate this poisonous ferment which breeds so much suffering for us, and thereby to liberate the obstructed vitality. There is, however, no other means to find this excepting by religion, for religion looked at scientifically being the doctrine which proclaims the reunion with God, it must of necessity show us how to arrive at this reunion. Is not Jesus the life-giving intelligence? He gives us the principal object of the Bible and of all the desires, hopes, and efforts of the Christians. Have we not received from our Lord and Master while still he walked with his disciples, the profoundest solutions of the most hidden truths? Did not our Lord and Master when he was with them in his glorified body after his resurrection give them the highest revelation with regard to his person, and did he not lead them still more deeply into central knowledge of truth? Will he not realize that which he said in his sacerdotal prayer, St. John chapter 17, verses 22 and 23, and the glory which thou hast given to me I have given unto them, that they may be one, even as we are one, I in them, and they in me, that they may be perfected into one. As the disciples of the Lord could not comprehend this great mystery of the new and last alliance, Jesus Christ transmitted it to the latter days, of the future now arriving, when he said, And the glory which thou hast given me, I have given unto them, that they may be one even as we are one. St. John chapter 17, verse 22. This alliance is called the union of peace. It is then that the law of God will be engraved in the heart of our hearts. We shall all know the Lord, and we shall be his people, and he will be our God. All is already prepared for this actual possession of God, this union with God really possible here below, and the holy element, the efficacious medicine for humanity, is revealed by God's Spirit. The table of the Lord is ready and everyone is invited, the true bread of angels is prepared. The holiness and the greatness of the mystery which contains within itself every mystery here obliges us to be silent, and we are not permitted to speak more than concerning its effects. The corruptible and destructible is destroyed, and replaced by the incorruptible and by the indestructible. The inner sensorium opens and links us on to the spiritual world. We are enlightened by wisdom, led by truth, and nourished with the torch of love. Unimagined strength develops in us wherewith to vanquish the world, the flesh and the devil. Our whole being is renewed and made suitable for the actual dwelling place of the Spirit of God. Command over nature, intercourse with the upper worlds, and the delight of visible intercourse with the Lord are granted also. The hoodwink of ignorance falls from our eyes, the bonds of sensuality break, and we rejoice in the liberty of God's children. We have told you the chiefest and most important fact: if your heart having the thirst for truth has laid hold on the pure ideas that you have gathered from all this, and have received in its entirety the grandeur and the blessedness of the thing itself as object of desire, we will tell you further. May the glory of the Lord and the renewing of your whole being be meanwhile the highest of your hopes.
Translator's note. It is of course evident that Eckhart Schausen is addressing two orders of mind, the reference to the Christian mysteries implying this. It is, therefore, as well to follow his advice and be silent, lest premature opinions might not only be useless, but misleading. It is abundantly clear, however, with regard to faith, the cultivation of which he so much urges, that he cannot mean the lower faith which does duty so much as the greater gift. I mean the faith which cannot discern what is mere current opinion from superstition, a vast quantity of which pertinaciously clings round all religions. By faith Eckhart Schausen means, I infer, agreeing to the great primal doctrines he enunciates as being beyond the solution of reason, but not in consequence to be discarded, for he urges zealously the necessity of reason. It is abundantly clear, therefore, tactician is advocating the cause, not of a blind superstition, as many people now imagine this religion of his to be, but of the highly philosophical, profoundly reasoned, and self-demonstrating system of theosophy experimentally understood by the higher minds of more advanced grade, but to the others still a matter of faith, that is, of future knowledge, if the proper means for acquiring it are duly followed. Isabel de Steiger.